Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mego Museum's Mint Off Card. My name is Brian, and I never expected to be doing this episode so quickly, but the FedEx man brought me a little surprise, and I am grateful to be showcasing the Disney Mego exclusive Fantastic Four set, which dropped today. I'm recording this before it dropped, so fingers crossed that went well. Before we go into this, I just want to reveal my bias towards the Fantastic Four and the Mego Fantastic Four set. When I was a kid, I had this Treasury edition, and I learned to read from it. It gave me a love for two things: the art of Jack Kirby and the Fantastic Four themselves. I worshipped them. I would watch the cartoon in French, because that's the only channel that showed it, and I seriously, deeply coveted the Mego figures. In fact, that would be my number one want as a kid, was the Mego Fantastic Four. I'd see them in Heroes World. I only ever saw the Human Torch once, and it was as I was leaving the store, which means you're not getting the thing. I was so obsessed with the Fantastic Four as a kid that I even made my first custom, which was taking Mr. Spock's clothes off, putting Robin's shorts on him, and making the worst submariner action figure ever. So even though I'm usually predisposed to Mego figures I didn't have as a kid as opposed to reproductions, but when I opened this thing, all that cynicism kind of washed away, and I remember making like a little gasp. Like, these looked great right on the onset, and of course the use of the Mego imagery and the figures themselves are so wonderfully posed in the set that I got a little excited. But let's dig into this set and see if you're excited for it. First off, let's talk about the window box packaging, which features clips from the Mego World's Greatest Superheroes boxes, and it is accompanied again by a coin. This time it is the Fantastic Four. Now, I had this treasure edition as well. I believe that's Rich Buckler. It's a really nice touch, and it ties it all into Heroes World for me, so I really like this. This one actually has the edition number on it. The last one didn't. It says they made 4,000, and I believe, but don't hold me to this, that is more than the Spider-Man set they launched with, so maybe there's a bit of a course correct in here. Turning to the back, we have a great photograph by Jason Seville. They all appear to be vintage Mego, and that makes sense in terms of the timing and production of this. We've got the Marty Abrams signature and his bio in 3 languages, which suggests it might get some sort of European release. It would make sense to release this in France, where Fantastic Four was a very popular television show. And of course, the box sides cleverly feature the original Mego cross-sell that you used to get on the sides of the box. If you're a Mego fan, that hits home, and that really works for me. So let's take the folks out of the container and see how Mego did with the actual reproduction World's Greatest Superhero boxes. And here comes my first surprise of this set. The Fantastic Four boxes were different from the early World's Greatest Superhero boxes we've seen before, and I largely assumed that Mego would just use the same template and not try to copy them, and I was incorrect. They actually did copy the 75 wave box style, that is a detail I was not expecting, and kudos to Mego for going that extra mile. They also managed to do something I'm really happy to see, and that is the reverse official World's Greatest Superhero logo on the Invisible Girls packaging, which is something that it dates back to the original, because when the package is red, you don't want the logo to be red. Speaking of logos, you may notice that Sue has gone from a girl to a woman in this new incarnation. She's been going by that handle for a very long time, and I honestly think it's a fair change, but I do get that some folks may not like it. The box sides contain cross-sell that feature just the characters in this set. Sadly, there are no spoilers of future figures, but I understand that. They've had to accommodate some packaging standards for international release here, and if you put them side by side with the classic Megos, they look pretty good together. One thing you'll notice is that the Human Torch's card insert is different from the vintage. In the 70s, the Human Torch was released with 2 different types of inserts, the blue and the orange. I would assume the orange came later to help the figure pop more, but I'm not 100% on that. Here's a quick view of the figures outside of their packaging, still tied to their backer cards. and they are very tightly tied in there, making for a really great display. It's one of the things I do really like about the era of modern Mego. These boxed figures look amazing in the package. I personally like to take stuff out of the box, especially on this show, but I do understand, or at least sympathize with folks who think they look perfect this way and keep them that way. However, it is time to free them, play a silly montage, and have a little fun. Hang tight, my thoughts will be at the end. So there you have it, the Mego Fantastic Four set. Now that we've had our fun, I thought I would spend the rest of this time comparing them to the vintage originals to see how they stack up or potentially improve. The first one I want to talk about is Mr. Fantastic. He is on that bandless body we've all seen before. The most glaring difference between vintage and modern is the textiles. This is a much more shinier spandex than we used in the past. However, that affords the luxury of being able to tuck Mr. Fantastic's gloves into his uniform more effectively than the vintage. And of course, speaking of the gloves and boots, they seem like very close replicas to the originals, just slightly shorter on the boots. The head sculpt is dead on from the original. It is a really great recreation. The Human Torch is also on the same bandless body we've seen before. The main difference here would be the bodysuit, which is sewn a little tighter than the original. And also, it seems like they played with the graphics a bit. I'm personally really fond of this change because it's a little more comic accurate. It looks more like the Human Torch to me. The colors really pop on this guy, and speaking of colors, he is a real deep red. I have to be honest, I didn't realize how faded my vintage Human Torch had gotten. These guys do tend to get a little, light over the years, but wow, it's shocking to see how deep red this guy is, and he's not going to lose his color. The posability is great, and I had no issues with the body at all. I'm really happy to see how well they pulled off the Invisible Woman recreation. A vintage Invisible Woman is expensive and tough to find in very nice shape. Their heads often go gray, or their hair is just completely ruined. So this will make a great proxy for a lot of folks. Again, the same issue as Reed, using a different type of spandex, doesn't really deter. In fact, it allows her to tuck in her gloves and boots as well, which looks great. She is not bandless. She is on the original Mego body, which is the same one they did in the 70s. So it has the same posing limitations that we're very, very used to at this point in our lives. The boots are a little shorter than the original. However, it's really hard to notice unless they're standing next to each other. However, the one quality I can't get over with this figure is the face paints. Perfect. Really nailed it, and it does look like a vintage Sue Storm figure. And finally, it's clobbering time. Let's take a look at Benjamin Grimm. Mego has kept his height consistent with the vintage thing. I know a lot of people were hoping he'd be a little taller. Personally, I'm fine with it for consistency. The suit itself, of course, is a different fabric and a slightly different shade of orange than we're used to. And speaking of orange, the head and fists are obviously a very bright shade of orange. And I want to say to you that my vintage La Chose is fading somewhat. The color tends to pour out of these guys, and at this point I kind of can't trust them as a guide for the coloration of them when they're original. But I think he used to be a lot more vibrant back in the day, so I think the new one is harkening back to the mid-70s look for these. Ben has one more surprise, but I will warn you, this contains nudity. My perv friend Steve demanded to see the thing naked, and lo and behold, he is on a newly tooled, muscular, bandless body, allowing him a lot more posability than the original. And honestly, there's a bit of heft to this. It's a very solidly made toy. I didn't have any problem with the joints, and I especially really liked the way the forearms were designed. It's very nicely engineered. And honestly, I was not expecting this. I was expecting to get a vintage reproduction, elastic body for the... So having the ability to twist him at the waist or actually have foot articulation, that's a big win. So there you have it. That is my mint-off card for the Mego Fantastic Four set. Before I go, I just want to mention that these most likely sold out online today, because that's how Disney do. But these will show up in parks, and there's a lot of great resources for Disney shoppers in the Mego groups. So if you don't have a friend who lives in Florida or California, I highly suggest you seek one of these out. From what I understand, half the inventory goes online, the other goes to the park. And based on the Spider-Man sales, I think you have a window of a month to 2 months to pick it up. I wouldn't wait on it. So if you're in the market, don't despair, don't use scalpers. That's the point of groups and communities, is to help other collectors out. And I've witnessed a lot of kind acts over the years, so reach out to us either in the Mego Mania group or on the forums at the Mego Museum, and we'll try and help you out. That's all I got this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please tell me your thoughts on the Mego Fantastic Four set. Are you going to stick with vintage, or are you all in on this? I'd really like to know. Thanks for watching, especially to the end. Until next time, buy what you like. Cheers.